Okay, so I'm going to start putting this all back together, kind of temporary like, so I can maybe try and test fire off this engine outside. But one of the things I want to address before I put the ignition coil bracket assembly back in, which goes in down in here, is I want to take a look at this fuel line here, because this doesn't look good at all. The line comes in to that quick connector here, which is held in by two bolts. One bolt is actually the shared, it's a shared bolt that also is one of the bolts for the ignition coil bracket. The other bolt is a lone bolt. And then the fuel line screws onto the back of that assembly and then comes up here to this fuel pump. But this line almost appears too short. And I'll show you what I'm looking at down in here. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to appreciate how much this is actually being turned up. It's being pulled up too much. In other words, this should have a nice gradual bend before it makes the turn to come up. And this is being pulled up. This line is tight. Over here, I can see that the line is cracked and dry rotted. Okay, right there. So this line is bad. And what I suspect happened is I suspect that this line was already failing and had actually gotten to the point where it was leaking here where it goes into the pump. And I suspect what somebody did is they just took the line off, cut off the end, and put the line back on again. But when they cut the end, that made this line shorter, so they had to pull up on this more than it should be. Also, you can see this is a clamp right here, and then it looks like they just added another hose clamp behind it. Okay, so I think originally this hose probably just went right from here down to there, and there were no hose clamps at all. There were just these crimp style connectors like this. But this line is just kaput, so I'm going to take that line out. Wow, that line is so dry rotted. It's just falling apart as I try and pull this off of the connection here. I don't know whether or not this is a threaded nipple it's fitting, a barbed fitting that's threaded in there, and then they tried to clamp the hose to it, or is this actually the original fitting and they just tried to reuse it? Well, this is junk anyways. I think it's going to be easy for me to just cut it here and unthread it from the housing. Alright, this fitting here is turning inside of the hose no problem, so I can unscrew it this way. I don't even need to cut that hose. I think, as memory recalls, I inquired about these hoses at the Mercury dealership parts department, and the guy said that, yeah, that they don't use these hoses anymore. They're not available or whatever, that you just basically rebuild them using barbed fittings and clamps. It's interesting that this hose is in such poor condition, but this hose actually, well, you hear that little cracking noise? Yeah, there we go. Right there, you can see it. You can hear that horrible cracking noise, and if you pull it, you can actually see the cracks opening up. If it's that deteriorated on the outside, there's high probability that the hose on the inside is also deteriorated, and what can happen is you can actually get little pieces of black chunks of hose that break off and actually get into your fuel system and wreak havoc. This one's really bad. You can hear the crackling. Oh, there's a nut underneath there. No wonder why this isn't unscrewing. Same size, 7/16. Okay. I'll stick that bolt right back in there so I don't misplace it. All right, so this is the littlest check valve assembly, basically. That the way it works is when you connect the fuel line from your gas tank to this quick connect, it pushes in on this right here and allows the flow of fuel. And then when you want to take your tank, disconnect your tank and take it off, the line off, this is supposed to come back and basically seal that. All right, I just blew into there and you saw the crud came out of there, so this isn't sealing anymore. You see all the crud and corrosion just blew out of there. Nasty. Now I think there's a way to actually take this unit apart and replace what, oh look at that. That just pulled right out. That just pulled right out of there. Boy, that's kaput. I said kaput twice, huh? Well, in lieu of the nightmarish situation that I'm seeing here with these fuel lines, I hold out very little hope that these fuel pumps are going to look much better. And since I already bought the replacement diaphragms for these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these fuel pumps off and clean out the housings and replace the diaphragms and gaskets. The interesting thing about this motor is there's a place right up here on the block where it almost looks like a third fuel pump would mount, but they're only using 2 fuel pumps on this model to run the 3 carburetors. Now I'd love to just unhook all of these lines willy-nilly, but I've got to be real careful taking note of how this all goes together, because what's going on here with the fuel system is kind of baffling to me. The nearest I can figure is that they've got this arrangement the way it is to ensure that there's pretty much adequate fuel pressure to all 3 pumps, regardless of what their elevation is in the fuel system. You know, the reason why I say that is because I know that this line that I just disconnected off of here, this fuel pump here, is the line where the fuel is going to come in from the tank. So it's going to come into this fuel pump here and be pumped by the fuel pump. Now, I know because this one down here has a plug in this lower port that this is definitely an outlet. Okay, so the fuel comes in here, gets pumped out here, goes up to the bowl on the top carburetor, which is a unique kind of animal in itself. The top and middle one are a little harder to see, so I'll show you on this one down here. This is the bowl assembly for this carburetor. And you've got this unit on the top here that has 2 connections, okay, that have fuel lines going to it. One that comes in on the top and one that comes in at the bottom here. Okay, now keep that in mind as I try and explain what appears to be the flow of fuel. So fuel appears to come into this pump here at this point. It is then pumped out through this line, which goes up to one of the connections on the top carburetor's bowl. The other connection on that top carburetor's bowl comes down and actually goes directly into the top connection on the second carburetor's bowl. Then the other line coming out of the second carburetor's bowl, the lower connection on that, comes down and goes directly into the top connection on the bottom carburetor's bowl. Then the line that comes out of the bottom connection on the bottom carburetor's bowl runs over to the outlet on the bottom fuel pump. All right? So what appears to happen is, it appears the fuel comes into this pump and is pumped out through this line, and at the same time fuel exits this fuel pump by the looks of it and goes into this lower fuel pump. The lower fuel pump must be pumping fuel out this line at the same time. Oh, the battery died yesterday when I was doing this, talking about this here. But anyways, what ended up happening was after the battery died is I decided to pull this pump off. Okay, and boy, I'm glad I decided not to just ignore these pumps and try and test run it the way it was, because this part right in here, this is called the diaphragm, and I don't know if you can really appreciate. This is supposed to be a flexible membrane, but it's lost all its pliability. So what's going to happen is the thing's not going to flex properly, so it's not going to create the pumping action that it's supposed to create. Not only that, but if it does try and flex, because it's so stiff, it's quite possibly just going to crack. And then, once that happens, I believe that could allow fuel to just enter into the crankcase where we don't want to go. So it looks like behind this diaphragm there's another gasket, and then there's a gasket on the cover itself. So if I pull this diaphragm off, got a little bit of liquid there. What is that? Can't tell what that smells like anymore. Looks like this hasn't been running quite a while. So this is the diaphragm, and it's not supposed to be plasticized like it is. The inside of the housing here, okay, actually looks pretty good. There's a little bit of dry crud right here that I can clean out. And then there are two, these are probably check valves. So you can kind of see that crud in there, the white crusty material in there. I'm going to have to clean out, twist this a little bit. So we're going to clean that out. Then the other little disturbing thing was this hose right here that I took off the pump that goes up to the top fitting on the top carburetor. Just kind of turned it a little bit, and lo and behold, it's really not even clamped in there anymore. I could pull it right out. So I'm not sure what's supposed to hold that in there. I hope that's not a press fit that's gone bad. It's just kind of weird to me. I think maybe there might be a O-ring or something in there. So we'll have to sort that out. For right now, I think I'll stick it right back up in there. Alright, but I've got to go work on the Dodge Ram for now.